Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Welcome back to this show. We are excited to have Lynda Roth here joining us today live on the podcast and the Zoomcast as the owner and executive consultant and author at LJR Consulting Services. Welcome to the show today. How are you doing, Lynda?
I'm fine, Jill. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here and great to see you in person. For those that may not know, you're from Wildwood, Missouri, and your company, though, is worldwide. Please tell us a little bit about what you do.
Well, primarily what I do is I work with mid-market businesses to help them become more digitally organized and be what I call a company for the 21st century. One of the things that I talk about is that we had a lot of technologies in the beginning of the 20th century that ushered in the Industrial Revolution, and we are in a digital revolution now. And the most important thing for you, for a company, is to, first of all, have the technology set up within their four walls, but then they must become interconnected companies where they're connected with their suppliers and with their customers digitally.
Got it. Well, I think it's good to find out more. Before we begin, it's ljrcs.com. Is that correct? The website?
Correct.
And do you have a phone number you want to direct people to as well?
818-216-7264.
All right. So we're talking about the assessment process, prescription, and implementation process you mentioned, and all these strategies that can really help unleash hidden potential profits in your business. So let me find out a little bit more about you before we talk more about the benefits of your work and the specifics. Lynda, I know we've talked about it before, but it's important to establish a lot about you. Tell me about you, your family, and how we got here. We have time.
Actually, I fell into being in technology, I guess you'd call it, quite by accident when I got out of high school many years ago. I didn't know what I wanted to do. My dad wanted me to be an accountant, which I thought was like about the worst thing that could happen to me. So my high school counselor suggested at the time that I take the IT curriculum at the community college, and I could graduate in 2 years and have a good job.
Yeah.
And that came true. I graduated in 2 years. I managed to land very quickly a good position at the time at Roth here in St. Louis. And then a couple of years later, I had an opportunity to work with Levi Strauss. They were advertising in the Midwest because they were opening up at that time what was an automated warehouse, one of the first of its kind. And so I went to work on that and then transferred out to San Francisco to work at Levi's there, which is how I ended up moving to California. But after a couple of years, I didn't like the Northern California. And I talked to my sister, who was living in Houston at the time, and told her I had picked out some cities, Los Angeles being one of them. And she said, well, move to LA and I'll move with you. And
really?
Yes. So then that started my decades-long career in Southern California. And in 2016, I decided it was time to move back to St. Louis and be with family.
Oh, my goodness. And where specifically in Southern California were you?
Well, most of the time, of course, when I first moved there, like everybody does, I moved to the beach. But what all of us don't know, especially somebody like me that was used to East Coast beaches, the West Coast beaches are rather chilly.
Really?
Oh, yes. That water's cold. That water's very cold. Even when I learned how to scuba dive, you wear thick wetsuits if you're going to dive in the Pacific Ocean because it's very cold.
I assumed it'd be hot over there all the time and the water warm.
No, that water's ice cold.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes. You must wear a heavy wetsuit to go scuba diving in Southern California. You can go scuba diving in Florida in a bathing suit.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. See, you're teaching me. I'm East Coast girl. I love California. I'm like, maybe one day I want to move there. I don't know where exactly, but can I ask specifically what beach areas were you living
Well,
in?
I lived in Manhattan and Hermosa Beach when I moved there.
Manhattan Beach. I've been there. Oh my gosh.
Yes. But if you've been there and you're walking along the Strand or close to the water, it's kind of chilly.
Well, you know what? I was there in the summer many years ago. So to me, it didn't seem chilly. Remember, compared to New York. But again, I was only there for like a week.
Right.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, but beautiful. And so now how much of your family is in St. Louis?
Well, I have my youngest brother and sister who are a set of twins that live in St. Louis. I
Hmm.
have lifelong girlfriends from high school that live here in St. Louis, and their families do too. And then I have two sisters that live in Arizona. One
Oh.
of them is the sister that said, "Move to LA and I'll move with you." And she ended up marrying a gentleman that was from Northern California, north of San Francisco, where it's a little bit warmer, and raised her family there. But then she moved to Arizona in Prescott, right by um, Prescott is kind of in the middle by Sedona. And then I have another sister that lives in Tucson, Arizona.
Wow, amazing. Thanks for sharing all this. So, wherever you are in the world, you could still operate your company because you can work with anyone anywhere, right?
Correct.
And yeah, and I know you guys, what's the word? You're executives. So, you're looking, if anyone here is listening, watching today, like CEOs, CFOs, to learn about technology services, and it's about productivity. So, we talked so many times before. What did you want to say for today, since it is kind of like a new show because there's a lot to your work and so many different categories.
Right. Well, thank you very much. Because where I, the area I like to work in is with mid-market businesses. A lot of mid-market businesses are still privately held, and many just don't have the the people that know what systems to get. So, for example, my current client, which is the first client I've had in St. Louis, amazingly
Hmm.
enough, um, they're a mid-market manufacturer, and they were all on old systems. And they, a friend got me involved with them, and I got called in to have a meeting with them. And what was funny was they have operations over in Europe, in Poland too, and they spent an hour complaining about value added tax in Europe. And I said, that's a simple one. I'll give you a freebie. There's a product called Avalera. You go buy that product and it'll calculate tax in every country in the world.
Hmm.
Done. Now, what's your next problem?
Yeah. Hmm.
And so the next problem was that they just didn't have the technology they needed. Almost everything that they were running on their manufacturing line was on spreadsheets, and it was just a mass of mess, right? And they're regulated by the FDA as one of the organizations that regulate them. And so when the FDA comes in and says you need to do these things better, right?
Hmm.
You got to get going and doing that. And so that's where what I call transforming a business comes in. I was brought in, and I have been working with them to bring all the technology they need and how they're going to work better with their customers and with their clients, and be what
Oh.
I call an connected business for the 21st century.
Ooh, can you tell us some examples of the businesses you're working for? Maybe mention their names or not. It's up to you. Give us some examples.
Well, it's been a variety. Like I said, this is the first St. Louis client I've had, because when I first moved here, I had quite a detailed network in Southern California, having lived there for several decades. And I mostly didn't have to sell to get business. I would just get referred. People would hear that I was done with a contract, and then I'd get calls. And so that's what happened when I was moving. I didn't tell anybody I was leaving and moving to St. Louis. I just left. And so within the first week, practically before the moving van even got to my house, I had 3 projects in Southern California again. So all the way through 2020, I spent working with California clients while I was sitting in St. Louis.
Hmm, nice.
And then I got a St. Louis client, so that was nice. But
Yeah.
interestingly enough, I still work probably 80% of the time remotely. I was at the client all day yesterday, but most of the time it's still I work remotely.
Wow. So tell me about these hidden profits. How do you do this? Explain the process of what a consultant does specifically for a business and how you internally go in and all the departments. It's got to be a lot of work, how you pull everything together. Could you explain it
Yes,
to?
it is a lot of work. It is a lot of work. And so the first thing I do is evaluate the business itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to know what they do, what their products and services are, how they work with their customers. And I'll give you an example of a prospect I talked to in Los Angeles. He decided not to hire me because he thought I was crazy, but really I was telling him gold, right? But his problem was he made the little dishes that go into frozen food dinners. And he complained that he got rush orders from the food manufacturers for his dishes.
Oh,
And I said, well, the reason for that is they don't look at the inventory that they have of your product until the last minute, right? They've got a plan in their ERP system, but they don't really look at everything, especially something like the little dishes, until it gets close to time to run that food product down the assembly line. And so he would get then rush orders about, oh, we need X number of this size dish, right? And so that's what he was complaining about. So I said, well, if you would connect with your clients and get information so that you know ahead of time what jobs they're going to be running when, because it's in their ERP systems,
yeah.
then you didn't have to deal with rush orders. You could make the product and get it shipped to them directly.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's what I mean by an interconnected business. If you've got the technology in all of these companies, especially ERP systems, which is probably 80% of what I start with in an organization, is okay, let's get the right ERP system in here.
Mm-hmm.
And then in selecting that, the next thing that happens, which also happened with this client, is, oh, well, I've looked at all of the major ERP systems and I can't afford them, because they can't. Those systems are tens of millions of dollars. But there are many, many mid-market ERP systems and all the other systems that go around that satellite of the core ERP system. There are many of them in the mid-market that they won't cost tens of millions. They'll cost hundreds of thousands, but not tens of millions. And so mid-market companies can afford them, but they're not the ones that you can easily find when you try to Google ERP systems. And most of those software products are sold not by the company that created it. Like if you're going to buy Oracle, you go to an Oracle office and call, and they send a sales rep out,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. But when you're looking at these mid markets,
Yeah.
they're sold by independent reps, for a lack of a better word, but they're people that sell the product and implement it for you.
Got
And
it.
they have their own small companies, and so they're not easily found. And I have relationships with many of those partners that sell and implement what I call the mid-market ERP systems.
Got
And
it.
they are very affordable for companies that are, 50, let's say 50 million to $1 billion in revenue.
Wow.
Because you can't really start affording the big Oracle and SAPs and Dynamics systems until you've got to be at least 500 million in revenue, and then you might be stretching it.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. All right, Lynda, remind everyone how we could reach you. We're about halfway through. Let's just
Sure. The best way
reestablish.
to reach me is by telephone at 818-216-7264, or my email address, which is Lynda, Lynda, at ljrcs.com.
Got it. What would you say some of the challenges that the companies that you're working for are faced with, and how do you bring that upon them to, do your research and let them know that, hey, these are challenges? Could you share a little bit about that?
Sure. The biggest challenges that they have is they don't know what software is available and where to get and how to go about getting it. So just like my current client, they knew that they were in pain. They knew that it was a problem to have all these spreadsheets trying to run this manufacturing of the products that they make, which the products they make go into food, nutraceuticals, etc., things that humans consume. So the FDA is very concerned about their processes.
Yeah.
Right. And so they were on old systems. A lot of their manufacturing processes were on spreadsheets, which the FDA is not overly thrilled with.
Yeah.
And so the FDA was saying, you've got to modernize your technology.
Yep.
And that's that's where the owner went to his friends. You know, a lot of these executives, they belong to organizations, and so they've got friends that have got businesses, sometimes businesses that are bigger than theirs. And so, you know, he was being directed to the Dynamics, to the Oracles, and he said, I can't afford those.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, there are many, many systems in the mid-market that I can introduce you to. And so that's the other side that I do, is I keep a lot of connections with all of these other software companies and the partners that implement the systems for them. And so I brought him 4 major software companies and the partners that work with those companies for them to select from. And so we went through a whole evaluation, and they selected a system, and now we're implementing it.
Awesome. Awesome. Congrats, Lynda. Lynda with the Y, by the way.
Yeah. Well, and then the next thing that they had is, because they make base chemicals that go into food,
Mm-hmm.
um, they're highly regulated, right? And especially on their manufacturing, and they have to have laboratory systems to test everything that goes on. They have to test raw materials when they come in. They have to test product during the manufacturing process. They have to test it afterwards. There's just a lot that goes on. And there are systems, like there are ERP systems that run your manufacturing, there are systems that run your laboratories. And so they have a complete laboratory that does all their testing for them. And so now I'm working with them on selecting what we call a laboratory information system, so that they can do better with organizing what's going in and out of their laboratory and documenting all the tests that they take.
Hmm. All right. Thank you. What else did you want to share? We still have 10 minutes left in the show. Nine
Okay,
minutes,
well, we can
sorry.
talk about a lot of things.
Gosh, yeah, it
Um,
goes so quick. Oh my gosh. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yes,
yeah.
well, let me get this.
Your book.
My
Yes,
book,
that's important.
right? My book is Digital Transformation: An Executive Guide to Survive and Thrive in the New Economy. And so what I talk about in here, this was published in 2020, so it's still pretty relevant, although a lot of companies did a lot of things during 2020, you know, kind of on a rush without really thinking about what they were doing, or being strategic about it. I would say they just, oh my gosh, we got to do something so that all of our employees can work from home, right? We have to do something so that our salespeople are not going into the businesses that they normally would visit, right? So how are we going to do all of this virtually? That was their big thing.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's time to step back, look at what they've done, what they've put
Okay.
in, and where they need to fill in the gaps on that, and become even more of what I call an interconnected business. So it's not only time to reevaluate what they've done, fill in any holes, but also look at interconnecting, like I was talking about, interconnecting with your suppliers and your customers
All
digitally.
right. Awesome. Tell me about, okay, when did you write the book? How long did it take? And where can we find
Well,
it?
it took about a year to write it,
Uh-huh.
because I had never written, and it ended up being, you know, like something, I'm not showing it. It ended up being sort of everything I wanted to say over a long career.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Um, but it is, I do feel it's an executive guide, because I talk about it now. A lot of it executives know now, with us being in 2023. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm also deciding whether I want to write the next level of this one or just update this. But I think it's time to have a book about being an interconnected business, because this one is more about what's in your 4 walls and what you
Mm-hmm.
have to do to become a digitally oriented company. And the reason I said it was an executive guide is because I wrote it to executives of, this is what you have to do to bring your company up to the 21st century. And so what I want to write next is how to become an interconnected company for the 21st century.
Awesome. Exciting. Wow. More work in the books. This is great. This is great. And
Well, also, I guess the other thing with me is, when you get to um, a period of time in your life where you've got a lot of work and body of work that you've done behind you, a
Mhm.
lot of knowledge that you've accumulated. At least for me, I felt like I needed to share that and have it out so that people who don't engage with me one-on-one
Yeah.
can learn a little bit and look at doing things based on the way I write, writing it and explaining how to do it.
Oh, awesome. We still
So,
got 5 minutes left.
so
Go
the
ahead,
idea
Linda.
was to
Keep going. Keep going.
keep
You're on
going, keep
fire.
going. Um, well, I really think it's important for mid-market companies to start being more interconnected with each other.
Hmm.
And so many of them are still working on, I was going to use the word struggle, but it may be that because a lot of times they're just like the client that I'm working with now. I talk to all my friends. Um, I've looked at the big name systems and I can't afford them.
Hmm.
So what is there for me to do?
Yeah.
And it would just be like if in the car vehicle manufacturing,
Yep.
if the only thing that you had heard about was Lamborghinis and Rolls Royces,
All right.
and those were the ones all over, and you didn't know about Ford and Chevrolet, um, and Buick and all those other manufacturers,
Yeah.
right, that sell to the average American. And I consider a lot of these mid-market businesses the average American business. Yeah, we've got massive companies today like Ralston Purina and
Hmm.
Levi Strauss and some of the ones I've worked for. But in between those massive organizations,
Yeah.
you've got numerous mid-market companies. Many are still privately held.
Hmm.
Some have been bought up by private equity firms, but many are still privately held. And a lot of them now are just like the one I'm working for. The second generation is taking over.
Yeah.
And so the second generation, and I can relate to that because my father owned an HVAC business, and the question came up, when he was getting ready to retire. My mom wanted to shut down the business. Was anybody in the family going to take it over?
Hmm.
And um, we had 4 girls and 1 boy, and my brother didn't want it, and all us girls were off doing something else. So he ended up turning it over to 2 of the men that had worked with him during most of the time that he was in business, turned it over to them, and walked away from it in the early 2000s. But the client I'm working with now, more than likely the owner's son is going to take over.
Wow.
That's what it looks like anyway. And so I've been spending a lot of time with him um, on some of the information that they need to have and things like that. So the owner has me working with his son more. And also because his son he's called chief of technology, but it's not information technology, it's the technology of their products and
Got
how
it.
they create them and everything, that type of technology. And so
Got it.
he's chief of technology of that. So he's responsible for coming up
Awesome.
with a whole lot of uh, new products, right? And things like that. So and managing the laboratory when you have a company like they do, and you're not run by the FDA, but overlooked by the FDA, right?
Yeah.
You have to comply with a lot of things, regulations that the FDA wants. And for what they make, they need to have a laboratory that's testing everything.
Hmm.
And so that's the next system that we're working on, is getting a new laboratory system for them.
Got it.
So,
Awesome.
I work with a lot of manufacturers,
Yeah.
and I kind of joke with my family and say, I think I know how everything is manufactured in the United States, because I started out at Ralston Purina, which made food. Then I went to Levi Strauss, which made clothes. Then I went to, at the time it's called Hughes Helicopters. They're now part of McDonnell Douglas, but
Oh,
they
wow.
they were designing, creating the
Hmm.
Apache helicopter when I worked for them. You may not know what the Apache helicopter is, but it's massive attack
Yeah.
helicopter that
The
the
military
military,
uses. Yeah.
yeah, yes, that the military uses. It's an awesome bird, a totally awesome bird. And so I ran all of the financial systems for that contract. And of course,
Wow.
spent a lot of time learning how they were putting it together. So, and then I've just worked in a lot of other manufacturing companies. I did transform a marketing company. That was one of my biggest quote transformations, because he did marketing for the automotive industry, sending out the little postcards on when your vehicle needed maintenance. But with the new vehicles coming out, I started working with them in 2013. When the new vehicles were coming out, the new vehicles are now telling you on your dashboard, you need an oil change, or your oil life is whatever it is, your tires are low. The vehicle's telling you everything that it needs, right? So you don't need little postcards anymore.
True. Yeah.
And he was going to go out of business. So he hired me to figure out what he could do to save his business. And excuse me, I found out that he had databases of over 20 years worth of information on vehicle behavior, on customer behavior, etc. And I said, there is the gold in your business. We are going to mine those databases, create business intelligence apps that you can sell to the dealers on a subscription basis. So then you have regular recurring revenue, right? And so that's what we did. I spent 3 years transforming that business from just a marketing business to a business information business.
Well, Lynda, I apologize. We're out of time now.
Okay,
Remind us one more time how we can reach you.
Lynda at ljrcs.com, Lynda with a Y, or my telephone number, 818-216-7264.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Pleasure having you here. Getting to see you live, and looking forward to the next time we connect. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.